Good day, everyone. I'm in conversation with Louise, the Executive Director of the Independent Philanthropy Association in South Africa. I'm Bhekinkosi Moyo. I'm from the Center on African Philanthropy and Social Investment at the Wits Business School in Johannesburg, South Africa. I'm recording this, I'm in conversation with Louise on a number of trends. Louise, I want us to cover 4 areas in the time that has been allocated to us. Firstly, would you speak briefly about IPASA and the work that it does in South Africa and in Southern Africa, if applicable?
Thank you, Becky. Yes, the Independent Philanthropy Association of South Africa is a member-based forum of independent foundations investing in South Africa. And our role in IPASA is to provide our members with enough resources, information, and convening opportunities to follow best practice in funding. We have a range of members from large independent foundations, both who are local, also those who are international who are investing in South Africa, as well as smaller intermediary foundations and philanthropic advisory organizations. And what we are working with our members towards is allowing them to get access to what are the trends in philanthropy around the world and how to keep up with the progress in philanthropy.
So, Louise, the symposium that we are attending is looking at innovations in philanthropy. And you and I, based here in South Africa, in Southern Africa, in Africa, have been studying some of the trends in philanthropy. From the perspective of IPASA, are there any trends that you might want to share with the audience from across the world?
Yes, I will share trends. I don't know if I would qualify them as innovations, but there is a trend, particularly over the last year and a half of COVID having hit our world, is there's a trend towards a community-led philanthropy, the practices of trust-based grant-making, participatory grant-making, the shifting of the power from the funders to the beneficiaries. So there is a movement really to work with the communities, the people on the ground who really are the ones who are experiencing the issues and often are the best people to develop the programs and to know how the programs should be implemented, so that the funders are directly engaging with them to develop the possible solutions to these issues. So it's a move from the traditional power balance, which has been in philanthropy for a long time, which we see as a very positive trend. Another trend is that, particularly in South Africa, there is the acknowledgement that there needs that many of the programs we're doing are not going to be successful unless we address the trauma that is existing in our society. And so philanthropy is now looking at how they can really deal with healing within their programs in order to capacitate beneficiaries to be able to deliver on the solutions that they are implementing. There also is a move towards looking at other types of funding, more innovative funding, catalytic type of funding, responsible funding, and initiatives, so that they're not just additional grant making, but trying to find ways to fund projects and programs which is more sustainable in the long term.
Thanks, Louise. So, I mean, some of the innovations, and we may not necessarily call them innovations, but we have seen a lot, especially during this time, around new forms of collaborations and partnerships. And I think IPASA has been at the forefront of that, especially in areas such as education, health, and others. Do you want to speak a bit about some of the collaborations and some of the partnerships that you have seen developing, especially under the current context?
Yeah, so with COVID hitting South Africa, IPASA ran a series of funder meetings, inviting funders within various sectors to meet to find out where the issues were in each of those sectors caused by COVID, and how those funders could collaborate in addressing the issues, because the issues were deep and big that no one funder could actually handle it alone. So two of the areas where we had quite a lot of traction, one was the basic education sector. And what we found was that there was a group of funders who joined together to address the psychosocial issues caused in education by the pandemic. And they partnered with the Mental Wellness Initiative and the Center for Violence and Conciliation, and put together a program to implement this in schools in order to help them address the psychosocial issues, so that their programs would be more successful in the long run. Also in the early childhood development sector, we brought the many players together to try and address the huge issues which came out of the COVID crisis, in terms of all the ECD centers being shut down. And we played a role in getting a group of major funders to collaborate to advocate for change. And what happened is it did get the government to pay out stipends to the ECD workers, which were not initially being paid, as well as to reopen the centres in order to allow that sector to continue.
So across the continent, and some of our philanthropic partners here in Southern Africa have contributed to that. We have seen philanthropies coming together, for example, to support the Africa CDC around issues that have to do with the platform for vaccine acquisitions, contact tracing, and others. And so technology has really been a leverage point for most philanthropies during this time. Are there any trends in South Africa that you have seen, especially with some of your members, on leveraging the use of technology during this period?
Just for IPASA ourselves, it's obviously allowed us through the technological platforms to reach a much larger audience of funders, which has been very beneficial. In terms of our funders, there has been much more effective mapping through technology platforms, mapping of all the different needs, the different beneficiaries in the area, and all the funders in the area, and how to connect them to see where the duplication is, where the gaps are, and to connect the right funders with the right projects. EdVision was one of those technological platforms which was developed in the education space. So that has been great in being able to access, to provide access to a wide range of information for all funders in South Africa.
And of course, technology is some form of an equalizer of some sort. And I think parallel to that, we have seen globally the calls to decolonize philanthropy. And I think that in South Africa, issues of racial equity, social justice fall within that particular framework. And I know that some of your members have really been keen on addressing the issue of social justice. I wanted us to spend a bit of time and talk a bit about some of the roles that philanthropy has been playing in trying to address some of the injustices of the past in South Africa, but of course it applies to some of the countries in Southern Africa as well.
Yeah, so we have been, IPASA has been running a series of social justice workshops for funders in order to make funders more aware of how social justice issues run right across every funding sector, be it education, food security, health. And so what we've been making them aware of is social justice issues. So food security is an example too, in that, you know, the lack of access to food among certain groups has obviously has not allowed them to be able to access the economy, the opportunities to look at. We've looked at the social injustice in education, and we've also in healthcare, and the lack of access for so many people in healthcare. So we are at the stage where we're just making our funders aware of what those issues are, and that they need to address those issues before they can actually fund projects and programs effectively, because those issues run deep, and if not solved, they won't be able to gain the success they have in their funding projects.
And of course, as we get closer to the end of our conversation, we cannot avoid talking about the context in which we've been operating. COVID-19 has just been one of those disruptors, but with it, it brought some of the new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things. But for South Africa and some of these surrounding countries, COVID was not just the only challenge. We had recent protests, we had recent lootings, and some of these have been explained as a result of the ever-existing problems of inequality and poverty, among others. What is the role of philanthropy in solving South Africa's big challenges?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and there's been a lot of discussion of it over the last year with philanthropy. You know, is philanthropy's role just to mop up after each disaster in our country, or is philanthropy's role and to fill in the gaps where our government is unable to fund the response to disasters, or is philanthropy to substantially, significantly look at the deep systemic issues in our country and to work on those? And there definitely is a thinking towards philanthropy funding systems change, to look at what are those deep systemic issues in poverty and inequality, and how do they address this. It's long, hard work. It involves a lot of advocacy. They're not instant solutions, and many of that systems change work is quite risky. But independent philanthropy, which is what IPASA represents, has the ability to take risks. They're not accountable to a corporate board or to the government per se. They're able to take these risks and fund systems change work. So that is what we're really seeing, is how can philanthropy identify the major system change issues in our country and work on addressing those in order to make a much longer term change. One of these obviously is the economy, and we're looking at how can they address this lack of employment, and employment opportunities, which is directly affecting the economy. What can philanthropy invest in order to create more employment opportunities, more income generation opportunities, in order to boost the economy, which then is obviously a natural way to tackle poverty in this country.
So Louise, the audience that we're speaking to would want to continue supporting, the majority of them are donors. They want to continue supporting in the space that you and many others operate in. Are there any last words that you would want to say to the audience, in particular around some of the ways in which they can support, some of the ways in which they can also be involved in some of the grassroots work that you are involved with some of your members? Any last words that you want to give to the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage them to become a part of the IPASA network. Not necessarily, they don't have to necessarily become members of IPASA. IPASA of the last year and a half has worked with any funders who are investing in South Africa. And if you become part of our network, you would have access to our regular meetings, our convenings, our workshops, where we discuss the various issues which we are dealing with, and try to find opportunities for collaboration, for coordination of response. and particularly, you know, around key issues in this country around the poverty, inequality, and lack of employment opportunities.
So thank you very much, Louise, for joining me today. We have shined a spotlight on some of the key issues that philanthropy faces in Southern Africa. But of course, as you know, philanthropy in Africa shares similar characteristics. There are other clusters that have been looking at philanthropy in West Africa and in other parts of the regions. So for us in Southern Africa, we share similarities with those in other parts of the continent. And some of the things that I think we've been trying to allude to include the fact that philanthropy has been on the increase in Africa over the last couple of years. And COVID-19 has actually demonstrated the size of philanthropy across communities, whether it's high net worth individuals, it's community foundations, it's your technical and operating foundations, but also the role that philanthropy continues to play in policy setting, policy formulation. Over the last couple of years, we've seen philanthropy in Africa going into the center stage in terms of deciding and influencing policies. The growth of high net worth individuals is something that we should look forward to, and we're seeing them beginning to play massive roles across the continent. The COVID-19, for the first time, our high net worth individuals gave more than they've done in the past 10 years. And this is something that we should be proud of as the continent. And finally, of course, like I said, technology is something that we should all be leveraging. We were forced, whether we liked it or not, to move into online platforms to improve our operating models, but it also challenged the ways in which philanthropy is done. And so some of those innovations are something that we will need to continue tracking and documenting over time. So thank you very much, Louise, for joining me today, and we wish the symposium a great success.
Thank you, Becky.